Good day, everyone. This is Wahida Shabazz L. We want to welcome you all to our first in a series of 5 campaign development webinars. I just want to thank everybody for joining us. This webinar is being recorded, and I'd like to see you all in the chat box to let me know whether or not you're able to hear me clearly. So please kind of chime in on the chat box to let us know that we can hear you. Great, Bob. Thank you very much. And yeah. So we have a lot of folks have already joined. We already have 19 people on. So I think we should just go ahead and get started. So again, I'd just like to welcome everyone, and just say again, this webinar is the first in a series of 5. All these webinars are designed to provide a knowledge base, some skills, and some tools for building winnable issue-based campaigns, which hopefully will result in improvements in the quality of our lives. So this is the first in a series of 5. We're going to be presenting one webinar per month. This is the regional organizer webinar. There's going to be one per month, all the way through and including May. So we'll have one per month, and we'll have the last one will be in May. We have 2 amazing presenters today, whom all hopefully you know. One is Arnita Rogers, our Repro Rights Justice Legal Fellow, and myself will also be presenting. We also have wonderful staff. Nana is in the office, in the front office, helping us with our technology and giving us support. We want you to feel free to please use the chat box, because we're going to be watching and monitoring your questions, and we're going to make sure we get all your questions answered there. And just so you know, there's going to be something a little different. There's going to be a poll quiz midway through this training. And at the very end of the training, there's also going to be some takeaway. There'll be a takeaway homework assignment, which is a little different than what we've been doing. We're going to ask people, if you're using your computer to hear, we ask that you please not use your computer, that you use your cell phone, that you use your phone and dial in the numbers in the chat box. And finally, at the end of this training, you'll be asked to take a short survey. Really short. It'll take you like less than 45 seconds to take the survey. And at the end, you'll be taken directly to the survey. So thank you. So I'm just going to go to and just give folks some background, because some of us have been here since 2008. Some of us are founder members of PWN, but we are a national nonprofit organization devoted to organizing and mobilizing advocates and developing leadership among more than 300,000 women living with HIV in the United States. Our mission is to prepare and involve women living with HIV and all of our diversity, including gender identity and sexual expressions, and all levels of policy and decision making. We do this by 4 objectives. We combat HIV stigma. We train and support women living with HIV to be leaders. We create and share tools for women to be advocates, and we mobilize for strategic campaigns. PWN applies a gender equality and human rights lens to the HIV epidemic, to make sure that federal policies are grounded in the realities of our lived experiences as women. And I also just like to share with you, that our vision and our mission is rooted in the concept of sisterhood. We are committed to ensuring optimal inclusion of all of our full diversity of the female experience. This is an act of solidarity, and this ensures that the lived experiences of every woman living with HIV is appreciated, valued, and respected. So being appreciated, valued, and respected is the foundation of self-empowerment. And from this foundation, PWN is able to support women living with HIV in engaging in a variety of actions, such as civic participation and, of course, advocacy. So today we actually have 2 presenters, and Arnita is going to begin, and I will follow up after Arnita. So thank you again for joining, and I'm going to let Arnita take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you, Wahida. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. All right, so thank you for joining and thanks for the introduction, Wahida. My name is Arnita Rogers and I am the Reproductive Justice and Legal Fellow at PWN. Today, I'm really excited to present this training on human rights framework to policy and advocacy or advocacy work because it is really applicable to everything that we will do at PWN. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. If you are on the phone or if you're talking through your computer, please be sure to go ahead and put your phone on mute. Uh-oh. Okay, thank you. All right. So just to give you an outline of where we'll go today, first we will go through definition of human rights. We'll discuss what that means and what knowing your rights within the context of having human rights means. We'll further flesh out the human rights framework, and then we'll apply that human rights framework to HIV and other human rights advocacy. Wahida will go on and explain how to apply the human rights framework through a gender lens as well, and then we'll further discuss PWN-USA's policies, and then we'll talk about your homework and applying the human rights framework and putting it into action to develop some of the campaigns that you may be working on in your region. All right, so human rights defined. Human rights are they're rights that we have as people just for being human, something that we are born into this world possessing. So as the slide says, that human rights, they're inherent, meaning that we're born with them, they're just innate to us, and they are inalienable, which means that no one can take them away. So some of the human rights are also characterized and defined by some core principles, including dignity, being worthy of esteem or respect, equality, meaning that we all share the same rights, no matter what our identities are, non-discrimination, being that everyone is entitled to human rights without discrimination, universality, meaning that all individuals are equal as human beings and by virtue of this inherent dignity of just being a human. Interdependency and indivisibility, which means that these rights, they work in concert with one another, that they can't be divided. When we get on to talking about the primary core human rights, we'll see that they all work together. They can't be divided, and that they are inalienable. Again, that these are rights that cannot be taken away, that we possess them all. Empowerment and participation, meaning that these rights, they empower and endow people to claim their rights from the government. These are not rights that should be looked at as charity, that are given from institutions or from others from being generous, but these are rights that we can claim as humans. And accountability, meaning that the government owes us as humans certain duties and obligations to respect us, to protect us, and fulfill our human rights and help us actualize them. Okay, so as I mentioned, that there are 5 primary human rights categories, and some of them we may be more familiar with than others. So the first category of human rights includes civil rights, which we probably know. We heard about the civil rights movement, the 60s. A civil right is an enforceable right or privilege, and this comes from the law. So examples of civil rights that we probably are all familiar with are freedom of speech or freedom of press or the right to assembly, and these come from our Constitution. And then those rights go hand in hand, are most paired with political rights. So that is our right to be involved or to participate in government. And so the right to vote, which is also a civil right, also goes in with other parts of political participation, being able to access our leadership, our government leadership, and being able to participate in our democracy. And so other rights that people we might not realize are actually economic rights are the last three: the economic, social, and cultural rights. So an economic right doesn't just include our right to work, but it's also actualizing a standard of living, to housing, access to food and healthy food. So these are things that are our economic rights that uphold our sense of human dignity, and also social rights. So we have the human right to fully participate in life and society. So this right might include the right to education, or the right to maintain your family or your chosen family, or the right to associate with whoever you want to associate with. That these are our social rights. They're a right to engage in community. And so your social right also goes right hand in hand with your cultural rights. And this refers to our human right to maintain community, maintain our culture, our way of life that's based on, not our, not what we do, but who we want to surround ourselves by. And we have that right as humans. Okay. So just rehashing some of the civil and political rights, which we're most often more familiar with, and probably have a greater ease thinking about these as human rights that we need to uphold. So some of these might include the right to life, freedom from discrimination. So some of these rights are also actually built into our Constitution, as I was saying. So like the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution says that, we have a freedom from discrimination, freedom of speech and belief. This also is protected in our Constitution, where we have our First Amendment rights to religion and freedom of speech, and the right to due process of law, meaning that our government cannot deprive us of our life, liberty, or property without giving us our due process, meaning that our government, when upholding our human rights, they are not allowed to enact state-sanctioned violence against our communities, or they are not allowed to haul us off to jail without a trial or any proceeding. And then additionally, the right to vote and participate in government. So these are things that we are often familiar with when we say we want to fight for our rights. I think these are some of those that most often come to mind. Those that we are less familiar with, or we're familiar with, and we acknowledge that we need these, but we don't often consider these, inalienable rights that we are all entitled to, are the economic, social, and the cultural rights. So this might include the right to health, the right to affordable housing, the right to food and education, and additionally the right to work and Social Security, being economically stable. So when you acknowledge that you have these rights and you know your rights, you can claim that right, and that is your legal right. You can hold the government more accountable for upholding those rights, and then you can let them know that they have a duty to provide certain things to make sure that those rights are upheld, giving them a matter of process to do that. You can also ensure that they know that they have a duty to prevent your rights from, or not to prevent your rights from being upheld. So if they're creating barriers to your rights being upheld, you can also demand those if you know your rights. And also, it creates a way to move advocacy around your civil and economic social rights from being something that is optional, that we are asking for, to something that is mandatory. We demand it. All right. So human rights and HIV. So our analysis indicates that HIV is a symptom of larger structural and human rights injustices. And I think we probably all realize that. So some structural factors that put women at risk for increased risk for acquiring HIV include violence, poverty, but those same factors also lead to poor health outcomes for women that are living with HIV. So this is this image kind of demonstrates how many of those structural factors are at play simultaneously, and these are some of the structural impacts of human rights injustices that impact women living with HIV, or people living with HIV. So you see here we have inadequate housing, substance use, access to health care, access to mental health services, gender-based violence, discrimination. We don't often consider these human rights injustices, but when we look back at those core principles, we can see that all of those are at play. We have a right to social rights and civil rights, and those all impact how we interface and how we are impacted by either gender-based violence or access to health care, either being it through medical care or mental health services. Right, this is another image that demonstrates how those factors are impacting us. These larger structural factors are impacting our ability to achieve human rights as applied to the South that has, some of these are more prevalent. We can acknowledge that these are prevalent, these issues are prevalent throughout the country, but the South has some of the greater disparities when it comes to, you see, we have most prisoners where we have more incarcerated people of color living in the South, or, attitudes towards comprehensive sex education may not be as progressive, where we still have a lot of abstinence-based sex education. So upholding a human right might mean access to education and being able to provide people with the tools so that they have a lower risk for acquiring HIV. You see that there's also the most uninsured individuals living in the South, and some of the weakest safety net programs we see with the failure of most of the southern states extending or expanding their Medicaid programs. All right. So the human rights framework, we talk about how to apply this framework to the advocacy that we'll all be doing and you'll all be doing in your regions and continue to do. Okay. So using a human rights approach to advocacy, this helps us, framing our issues as a human rights issue, helps us establish a mechanism for government accountability and encourages public participation in the decisions that affect our lives. It focuses on the underlying causes of the problem and then offers positive alternatives and solutions and a vision for our stakeholders. It's really important because this helps us move beyond the rights of the individual and thinking about our human rights as a collective. When we hold our government accountable as a human, I think it increases our ability to think about more solutions and more, involvement from people who want to advocate for human rights. So healthcare is a great example to apply the human rights framework with. And I was thinking about this, and we were just coming off of the MLK Day holiday, and I remembered a quote that I'd heard from Martin Luther King from one of his speeches, and he said that of all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. So people have been applying the human rights framework to access to healthcare for a very long time. We can see healthcare that we can use a human rights framework to emphasize that HIV prevention, care, and treatment programs are not just discretionary benefits to be provided or taken away by government at the local or federal levels, but it's a basic human right that must be fulfilled. Once again, going back to this notion that our human rights are inalienable, that this is not charity. We don't deserve access to care because our government is being generous. this is actually a human right. So this conversation becomes not what is or not as affordable, but what is necessary to fulfill people's human rights to health. So making sure that healthcare is available, it's affordable, accessible, even more than acceptable, and it's of high quality. Okay, so that was a lot of information about, kind of prepping us to think about how to prepare to apply the human rights framework. I wanted to take this minute just to do a check-in with a few polling questions, just to see if we are following along. Just a second. I'm going to open voting for about 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close this poll. This was great. We got 100% on that, asking whether a human right, if you must earn a human right, or in order to have your human rights, you must earn them. And everybody said that that was incorrect. Of course, that we were just discussing that these are inalienable rights, that these are something that we all have just by being people. Okay, and I'll do one more. I'll leave the poll open for 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Okay, great. Everybody got that one right too. That was false. There's 5 primary human rights categories that we discussed. It's civil rights, political rights, economic rights, social, and cultural rights. All right. So it looks like we're all moving along on the same page. I'll take it away, or Wahida will take it away.
Thank you, Anita. That was excellent. That was excellent. I can move that off my slide. Okay. So I'm glad to see you all participate in that poll. It's important that we know that you all are uptaking this information, because this information is going to be critical to our success of developing our campaigns. And earlier, we said that PWN applies a gender equality human rights lens to the HIV epidemic to achieve the federal policies that are grounded in the realities of our lived experiences. So I want to talk a little bit about that gender equality and human rights lens before we actually move on to our policy areas, which this webinar is really all about. So when we talk about using a gender lens, we focus on women and girls, and we build a movement to advance women and their allies around the world. And understanding the unique challenges, needs, and realities of women and girls that we face in the ways which systems and institutions and policies impact our lives, and those are the things that we must change to advance women's equality. So we want to be able to, and one example of identifying the conditions in which needs to be changed to advance women and girls is our own PWN-USA Brian White research project, which we recently we're just finishing up. This research was done by women living with HIV. They were interviewing women who lived with HIV, and now we have this summary that Arnita has been putting together, which we're going to be able to present as an advocacy tool. We'll have it ready for AIDS Watch, We'll have a shorter version ready for Age Watch, and the full report is going to be released on National Women and Girls Day. So when we talk about a gender lens, it's us looking to see how these policies impact our lives, what's missing for women and girls. We have unique needs, and this is what we need from our decision makers in order to improve the quality of our lives. So we talk about using a gender lens. And again, I just want to make sure I'm on the right slide for you all. Okay, great. So, and when we talk about improvements in our lives, human rights are actually supposed to be protections. And we're talking about protection our right to education, economic justice, health and reproductive rights, rights to housing, nutrition. Upholding women's rights means all of these things. The social inclusion is seen as the social inclusion of women being at the table to be able to present our Ryan White research summary, right? That actually is how we want to present ourselves when we're at decision-making tables, because we ought to be at the planning tables when decisions are being made about our bodies and about our lives. So we are able to present our own advocacy tools now as we use our gender lens, and we're able to provide positive proof that what we're saying is not just from a few people, but from a number of women around the country. So again, we have to talk a little bit about social justice. And social justice is a view that everyone deserves an equal chance. Everyone deserves an equal playing field. That everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. Peace is not possible where there are gross inequalities of money and power. And as we see some of the actions and outrage that's coming from the community these days, and they're saying no justice, no peace. And that's economic justice, that's educational justice, that's justice of policing our bodies or being able to have respect in our communities, women's rights. So we're talking about a social justice view that everyone deserves to have an equal opportunity, and that peace is not possible where we don't have it. So again, Arnita touched on this a bit, framing our issues of human rights. Issues establishes a mechanism for government accountability. The conversation becomes not what is or what's not affordable, but what is necessary now to fulfill our human rights. So until we kind of make these connections, it's important that we sort of make these connections between the structural factors, some factors we may not have any control over in our lives, some structural factors that may have caused us to be more vulnerable to HIV in the first place, social and economic and cultural factors. Until we make those connections, our advocacy is going to be lacking. We have to make the connection between human rights, between us being here, because our human rights being violated or not being upheld has caused some vulnerabilities and people becoming HIV positive. So we have 56,000 new infections every year, and there's a reason why. Because somewhere along the line, someone's still homeless, someone's still fighting with poverty, someone doesn't have any health care, someone's not getting the correct information, it may not be in their first language. These are all human rights infractions. And so we have to make those connections moving as we move toward using human rights in our advocacy. Yeah. So, and here's the big, and this is a big takeaway. We've always heard that HIV is preventable, but we hardly ever hear that HIV is preventable only in the ideal world. Messaging that tells us that HIV is preventable creates internal stigma. It impacts our ability to stand up and fight back. We sort of feel as though we don't have the right to fight back. because we've contracted a condition that everybody said was preventable. But that sort of messaging has a negative impact on our ability to carry out our civic duty as people who live in a democracy to challenge our government. We have a right to challenge our government, and when we hear messages that are harmful, that HIV is preventable, but we don't hear that it's preventable only in the ideal world, that adds to internal stigma. So what's an ideal world? So when we talk about an ideal world, and if you all want to hit up in the chat box and talk about some things where you know what consists of an ideal world, I would say making women a priority is an ideal world. Eradicating homelessness and poverty is an example of an ideal world. HIV can be preventable if we live in an ideal world, when people's human rights are upheld. HIV can be preventable when prison reform brings about an end to mass incarceration that totally destabilizes our community. Yeah, thank you. HIV, ideal world is where substance abuse and mental health programs are fully funded resources in our community, and where we end abstinence-only education with still young people. So HIV becomes preventable, but it's only preventable in an ideal world. And I think that's important to keep saying to our membership, because when we take on the entire blame of HIV epidemic, it cripples our ability to even advocate for ourselves. When we take on the entire blame of contracted HIV, it feeds into internal stigma, and internal stigma impacts our ability to advocate and stand up for ourselves, our civic responsibility. It also, in addition to compromising our civic responsibility, it also allows our decision makers off the hook, even have to address these social and economic factors that may have caused us to become HIV positive in the first place. When we carry the weight around and take all the blame as though we could have prevented HIV, amongst poverty, homelessness, lack of education, no health insurance, then we allow our government to be off the hook. And that's not what we want today. We want to advocate for ourselves and not allow that to happen. So, what do we want? Meaningful involvement of women living with HIV. And when do we want it? We want it now. We're going to move into talking about our policy priorities. And I'm using here, and we're going to have our national summit coming up, where we're going to continue to develop our skills as advocates, develop our skills as human rights advocates and social justice leaders. But what do we really want in all of this? No matter what happens, no matter what policy we're trying to change, at the core of that is that there's meaningful involvement of women living with HIV. Nothing about us without us. We need to be at the table. And so PWN's mission is to prepare and involve us to be at those decision-making tables. And so here are our 6 policy areas. And I presented this like in a marquee as though none of you have ever seen it before, but we've all seen it before. And we all understand that there are 6 things that there are 6 priority areas. Not that these are the only things that are wrong in the world that women need to work on, but we've identified through surveys, through listening sessions, to talking with our constituency, that these seem to be the top priorities. So they're a priority for us. Ending HIV criminalization, achieving economic justice and employment rights for people living with HIV, achieving women-centered care for women living with HIV, promoting HIV prevention justice, because we also want to keep people who are not HIV positive. We have a duty to make sure that they get the proper information and mechanisms and tools so they can remain HIV negative. We want to be able to exercise our sexual rights and our productive rights and productive justice. And we want to end violence against women and girls living with HIV. Or just end violence against women and girls, period, because we've connected violence and trauma to women acquiring HIV. These are our 6 policy areas. These are the campaign areas that we're asking you all to develop in your local areas. If you're in an area where criminalization is the problem, then that should be the campaign you all should be looking at developing. If you're in an area where there's a lot of intimate partner violence going on, then you should be looking at number 6. But overall, PWN works on all of these policy areas. These are the areas we're able to give you all technical support. When you want support from PWN National, if you're working under our PWN platform, this is how we can support you. So these are the areas that we've identified as important for PWN-USA regional chapters to work on and for our members to work on. And so I'm going to go through these and kind of break these down just a bit, knowing that I'm not going to have time to break everything down. But let's talk about repealing HIV criminalization. When sex is a crime, when spitting is dangerous, it's a dangerous weapon. We all know that we all understand what's going on with HIV criminalization right now, right? HIV criminalization, it doesn't address the root cause to the problem, right? And it's totally problematic for women. We know that for women, if you get a felony conviction, it's going to compromise your ability to go into public housing, compromise your ability to live near school, compromise your ability to reproductive justice rights, compromise your ability to parent. They compromise your ability to make a living. A lot of jobs that women get may be around children and or elderly. So it compromises our ability to uphold our own human dignity. When you can't get a job, you don't have a place to live, and you can't have your right to parent. These are human right infringements, and they infringe on your actual human dignity. So when we say we have some recommendations for each of these 6 categories, PWNs. We kind of break it down what the problem is. Then we also move into the recommendations. We want to always not be left with identifying the problem, but actually moving into the solutions, or moving into recommendations. And there are many, many recommendations. I just have a few of them here. PWN recommends that we uphold the human rights of all people, support human rights and public health solutions rather than criminal prosecutions, right? That we ensure human rights upheld when prosecutions occur. That we educate legislators, we educate judges, prosecutors, criminal defense attorneys on how HIV is not transmitted, right? That they have up-to-date developments around virus suppression. We support the expansion and access to civil, criminal, legal representation for people living with HIV. And we also support the national AIDS strategy. There's also a recommendation that we support the national AIDS strategy efforts to review and assist amendments and elimination of these state-by-state exposure transmission laws. So we have these fact sheets are on our website up under policy. Each area that we're talking about is on our website under policy. You'll see criminalization, in decriminalization, you'll see recommendations. You'll see economic justice and employment rights, and you'll see recommendations. So poverty, and we've learned that poverty may lead to HIV, but HIV may also lead to poverty. And I know many of our constituency has shared with us how they have lost particular jobs due to their HIV status. They've shared with us, women who are poor may not have stable housing, or may also have to have less power to negotiate safer sex in relationships if you don't have the economic justice, if you don't have the stable housing. So poverty can lead to HIV. If you don't have stable housing, you can't negotiate safe sex. This becomes a vulnerability for you. HIV may also lead to poverty. Benefits programs, including the Drug Assistance Program, the ADAP program, right? Sometimes these drug assistance programs, they don't have they're not funded. You can't get there's eligibility requirements, there's eligibility caps. If you make too much money, you can't use ADAP. If you don't make enough money, ADAP's still not available. If you don't have the correct advocacy in your area. And a lot of times women are being incentivized to stay poor. You know, we know that if we attempt to go to work, then there are some benefits that are taken from us. So a lot of times, so we fight for economic justice because poverty can lead to HIV, and a lot of times HIV can also lead to poverty. So again, moving into the solutions, So we're recommending that we develop policies that support women's rights to work and be paid a living wage. We recommend reforming policies and programs that incentivize people to get sicker, right? And we also recommend compassionate policies that support HIV individuals transitioning back into the workplace. So again, these are just some of the recommendations, but not all of the recommendations. And if you have any questions, please feel put them in the chat box, and we'll be happy to shoot over there and hopefully provide you an answer. I'm going to move to the next slide. I know this is a lot of information. Another priority for PWN is securing women-centered care. And this is a big one because over half of people living with HIV in the United States are estimated to be out of care. Studies show that's even worse for women than with HIV. And the CDC there was a study at the CDC, there was an article published by the CDC that showed that race, gender, and geography may play a key role in outcomes for HIV-positive people. Women are getting sicker and dying faster, especially Black women, African-American women, Latino women, and particularly women who live in the South and rural areas. Women's medical care and support services, well, our needs are unique. So achieving the best outcomes for women living with HIV is going to require care that's non-stigmatizing, that's holistic, that's gender sensitive, that upholds our rights as women and upholds our dignity, and that is peer-based and that is culturally relevant. I actually witnessed some of those recommendations already, but we have clear recommendations for achieving women-centered care, and again, sustaining and expanding central supportive service to keep women with HIV, to keep HIV-positive women in care, especially young women, older women, and women who are especially vulnerable to human rights violations. That means sex workers, transgender women, drug users. So we have particular recommendations of how, if you want to have a campaign around securing women-centered care, these are your demands. Our recommendations are more or less your demands for your campaigns. So we have these priorities laid out. We have the scope of the problem laid out. We've also laid out some of the solutions. We're going to move on to HIV prevention justice. And so our policy around HIV prevention justice is a call for institutionalizing and effective HIV prevention. You know, so, and I put a couple of photographs. This is HIV prevention justice, affordable, stable housing. That's what the keys are for. Oftentimes when we think about prevention, we think about a condom, the condom, but there's also things in development like the ring, you know, for women living with HIV that can be placed inside of their vaginal. These are things that these are things outside of a condom that can help prevent HIV. That's why we call it HIV prevention justice. Supporting syringe exchange programs. All these things are just HIV prevention justice. For women in particular, HIV prevention justice has a lot of unique nuances because telling a woman to abstain or ask a woman to just use a condom is just not enough to protect her from HIV. So we're calling for HIV prevention justice. And here's a big one for HIV prevention justice is PrEP for women. It's PrEP for women. And, you know, we know PrEP is available, it's technologically available, you know, but it doesn't seem to be trickling down to women. So women, we want to be safe. Women will be safe from HIV when overall quality of our lives and the lives of our loved ones is uplifted, and when we have a variety of ways to protect ourselves, including methods that don't require our partner's consent or our partner's knowledge. So we want to move forward the policy platform, the policy area of HIV prevention justice. And then we also want to move forward our reproductive justice rights for women living with HIV. This means upholding a full spectrum of sexual and reproductive rights. And this also includes our right to choose when and how to be sexual and whether to have a child, and the information that we need to make informed decisions. Reproductive justice also extends to parenting and custody rights, which are often taken away from women living with HIV, particularly if there's criminalization laws in their state. So our recommendations for reproductive justice are as follows. We recommend sexual and reproductive health services should be well integrated with our HIV services so that the needs of the whole woman are met. We recommend that we are providing quality, comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services, including HIV mechanisms in jail and within the prison system. All women have a right to information, voluntarily informed consent before HIV test or before a medical procedure, particularly if that medical procedure is going to render her unable to have birth. These rights must be upheld without stigma and without discrimination. And there's a number of rights. We also recommend to prevent discriminatory outcomes in legal cases involving women living with HIV, that the civil and the criminal justice system have to be up to date and have to have accurate information. So this can help prevent breaches of justice that sometimes occur in child custody cases where one parent's HIV positive and the other one's HIV negative, and the women's reproductive rights are unfairly burdened due to her HIV positive status. Ending violence against women and girls. And I should not have put against women and girls living with HIV. Ending violence against women and girls, period. We have many studies that have shown that trauma and violence, a lot of us share a background of trauma and violence. There have been many studies to show that many women who've been exposed to trauma and violence in their lives ultimately end up being HIV positive. So the end to many different forms of violence faced by women, including physical violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, religious violence, sexual institution, economic violence, and all the trauma that it leaves in its wake. So many of us suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome. We haven't been maybe fully diagnosed with these conditions, but what we're asking for I can leave. I'm sorry. Could you please mute your phone? Who's ever talking right now, we can hear you on the webinar. So just hit *6, mute your phone, and we deeply appreciate you. Thank you. So again, our recommendations to end violence against women, it's pretty much, it's a couple. There's the federal leadership that we're looking for, and so that we're looking for bold leadership to address violence against women from HIV through the president's, through the interactive working group. We're also looking for Health and Human Services Department, the Office of National AIDS and Infectious Disease Policy, and POSHA. So we're asking for bold federal leadership from these federal agencies who can make policy around violence against women and take the recommendations that women's groups give to them, right? We want to repeal all the laws that criminalize HIV and provide sensitivity trainings to law enforcement officials. To providers, to health providers, we want to give sensitivity training to violence specialists and child protection services. One of our recommendations is that there's an intake, that there's service integration. Anywhere where there's an intake into an ASO, AIDS service organization, CBO, community-based organization, that there's a screening, that there's a standard, routine, intimate partner violence screening and health counseling. So not just, is someone hurting you now, but tell us about what happened, and not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And I think that's one of the things that's missing. There seems to be some activity in chat box. Tammy, if you look in the box, okay, so folks are talking in the chat box, and Nan is helping folks over in the chat box. So again, more recommendations to end violence, train and build capacity of all providers and healthcare workers and staff and peers to have knowledge and skills to access, to make the assessment when they're addressing signs of violence and trauma. So there's a lot to be done here. We want to be able to fund and support and promote homegrown interventions. They come from us, right, that address violence and trauma, because we are the experts. So we want our interventions that we come up with, they need to be supported, they need to be funded, and intentionally integrate trauma recovery and intimate partner violence within shelter systems, within HIV care clinics, within local and state departments, health clinics, and so we're talking about, now we just went through 6 different, let me just change the slide here. We just went through 6 different priority areas. And what's important about all of these is to remember the meaningful involvement of women living with HIV, because we can make an impact on each one of these policies in our area, but if someone's in our area is working on HIV criminalization and women don't show up, then we always say if you're not at the table, then you're going to be on the menu. So your voice will not be carried. If our voices are not carried, then we don't get the changes of policy and the quality of life that we're asking for. We talked about a vision that we envision a world where women with HIV can live free, healthy, dignified lives, free from stigma and discrimination. It begins and ends with us. So with all of these policy areas, we need to bring we need to bring PWN's recommendations into all of these policy areas in our work as we plan our campaigns and our regions. We want to make sure that we get to the table, that we're meaningfully involved, and that we get our recommendations out to when we work with other partners, or when we're working with allies. We want to make sure that we bring our recommendations to the table. Our allies, they have some great recommendations, but we need recommendations from women living with HIV. We need to have that meaningful involvement of women living with HIV. So I'm almost done. I think I have one slide after this. You all may have seen this illustration. I sent it out right before the holiday, before the first of the year holiday. And this is our 2016 campaign planning maps to successful campaigning. And what we're hoping that you all sort of internalize, we feel like made the map for you. And what we're looking to see here is that we're going to do some skills building webinars. We're going to give you some messaging for your campaign. We're going to teach you how to check what's a good issue to work for in your area. We're going to give you some skills to do that. We're going to introduce you to some strategy charts to be able to lay your campaign out and not have it in your head, but to be able to lay it out in front of all your members of your chapter so everybody can be a part of the campaign building. We want to help you build partnerships along the way. By the time we get to the National Summit, we're hoping that you all will be there. You will show up able to articulate to all of our members who will be there your campaign in your areas and how you are facilitating change in your area through PWN's priority areas. Also, in this little red box, we also want these webinars reviewed. We realize that no time of day is going to be the right time of day when everybody can be on a webinar. We realize that. And so for those of you who are here today, and particularly co-chairs, we're asking co-chairs that these webinars be reviewed back at your local chapter, because we have to create a level of knowledge. All of our members should have a basic level of knowledge. Without having this basic level of knowledge, we're going to leave some people behind. So we're asking the co-chairs to, as a part of their coordinating their meeting and their meeting agendas, that these webinars have to be reviewed. They're being recorded right now. There's a link. All you got to do is click the link, and the slides will move by themselves. You'll hear Arnita talking. You'll hear me talking. You can pause it whenever you want to have a discussion amongst yourselves. But this is your roadmap to what's going to lead you to some winnable campaigns, hopefully through before the end of the year. I'm again checking the chat box. Looks like I have is there a question there? Let me see. The webinars will be on our website. All these webinars will be on our website under resources. The website has been revamped. If you haven't been there, you should all go look. It's really easy to find stuff. So under resources, you will find all the webinars listed. And so this is the first part. We talked about a homework assignment. So the first part, we have a 2-part homework assignment for you all, and you're going to love it because it's going to build you up, and it's going to build up your ability to be able to speak truth to power, and that's what we want, and be able to build winnable campaigns in your regions. We want to win, right? So one of the things that we're asking folks to do, and that is prepare chapter members to build local campaigns. One of the things that we're asking you all to do, and particularly we're asking the co-chairs to do this, that you're going to be the point person, coordinate a time, a place, with AV equipment so your members in your local chapter can uptake this information. It's okay that you sit around together and go over this webinar together. It's okay that you go over it in your spare time, anyone, but it's very healthy to have an environment where you're together, uptaking this information together, so that people can have opportunity to ask questions. So we're asking the co-chairs to take the lead on this year. And the second part of our work activity is to have you work on applying these PWN, applying these human rights, putting human rights in action, putting everything we just taught you into action. And so we created this chart. You all going to get it in a Word document where you can actually write inside the chart. And so this is just it's a problem solver. Which PWN policy approach can help build this campaign? If the problem is, and I've done one for you, yeah. If the problem is trauma against women, right? And you want, if that's the problem, then which policy would that come up under? It would definitely come up under end of violence against women. What is it that we want? What's one of the recommendations? We said we wanted intimate partner violence screening. What's the other recommendation or demand? That we have trauma-informed care, right? If the problem is HIV criminalization, policing and incarceration of people dealing with HIV, which policy would it come up under? It would come up under ending criminalization. What is it that we want? One thing we want is to repeal stigmatizing HIV criminalization laws. So we want you together as a group, after you watch the webinar, to actually go through this chart, to go through these problems, figure out which PWN policy will cover this particular problem, and what would be the demand. That's your campaign right there. Here's a roadmap for a real easy campaign, because wherever we live, we've already identified that these problems do exist. Now we want you all as a group to identify which PWN priority area could we all work on this together with, and then under which PWN recommendations, what could be our demands if we decided that this was going to be our local campaign. So I believe that is the last slide that we had. we have time for questions and comments. And like I said, this is the first in a series. This is the very first in a series of 4 more webinars that you're going to be getting around campaign planning. So, as I said earlier, there will be a webinar around choosing a policy. Choosing a good issue to work on. There will be a webinar around messaging your campaign. There will be a webinar around how to put your campaign, putting it into a strategy chart. The webinar today was Internalizing PWN priority areas using the human rights framework. And we hope that this is going to give you a good knowledge base to be able to go down this road and travel down this road. And as you go along, that you're going to be building partnerships along with other groups who work on similar issues. They may not be an HIV-specific group, but they can certainly help you do this wonderful campaign. And then when the summit comes, we're looking for you all, for some of you, some of the chapters will hopefully be able to present their campaigns, maybe in a plenary, maybe in your in a pre-institute, a pre-summit institute, like a day-long institute the day before the summit. But we have, but our hope is that by the time we get to the summit, that you all will have to be able to share with some of the other groups who may not have gotten there how you actually went through this roadmap, and that this roadmap actually worked for you all. Someone's asking for a copy of this presentation. Antoinette, you can absolutely have a copy of this presentation. I will send this presentation out to you all in a PDF so you can get the actual presentation, but we will also send you a link. We will also send you the link. And when you turn on your computer, hit the link, and then we'll open up, and the slides will move by themselves. You could be baking a cake and still watching this presentation, that you would be able to listen and watch the slides move. You need a hard copy. We'll get you a hard copy. Don't forget, ladies, after this, there is going to be a short survey after this call, and when we end the meeting, it will take you directly to the survey. So we can open the lines if you want to come off mute. If someone wants to ask a question, we still have a little bit of time. If anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question, we're certainly happy. Thank you, Helen. Helen said it was a great presentation. We work really hard, and Arnita, if you need to come off mute and add any comments, you're more than welcome. We work really hard to make sure that we're giving you this information in a way that's relevant. That we're starting with the correct level of knowledge that you all need. And if it's not what you need, then please let it show that in your survey. But we're hoping that this will give everybody a base from where we can grow, and that we hope that these webinars will be a part of your local, whatever you're doing locally. These webinars need to be a part of that, particularly if you're in a regional chapter, or if you're, again, to start a regional chapter, or if you meet with groups of women. This is ideal for you all to just put up the PowerPoint. Just open up a browser. Open up your browser, hit the link, and be able to watch these webinars together and strengthen your ability to be great advocates. Yeah, and Tammy said that it's her passion, and so you know how to begin to fight the issue. That's awesome, Tammy. So any of these can be a campaign, any of these can be a campaign header. HIV criminalization, it could look like you're just going in and re-educating your health department. It could be you going and educating some public defenders, because most of the time it's the public defenders who are defending a lot of these people who may not have resources for a really good criminal lawyer. If we go in and educate the public defenders in our community, that's a campaign, and we teach them our recommendations and help move them forward, So there's a lot of ways to develop a campaign around any of these, but we're hoping that you all understand the PWN has a platform. This is our platform. This is what we work on. Ending criminalization of HIV, achieving economic justice, right, so people living with HIV, achieving women-centered care, ushering in HIV prevention justice, obtaining and exercising our sexual rights as sexual beings, our reproductive justice rights, ending violence against women and girls. This is our platform. And and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there are other people in your community who are working on these issues, bring in the meaningful involvement of women living with HIV. We have fact sheets that are on our website. You have access to these materials, and you have access to PWN staff. Yeah, it would be great to have. Nana says it would be great. That's a great campaign. Oh, Tammy has a campaign? Yeah, it'd be great for her and other regional members to join these webinars. We try to invite everybody. Some people, a lot of people, more people register. I'm glad that you registered. That's a good thing about the pre-registration is that you're able to connect quickly. When you don't pre-register, then you're running around, where's the phone number? I can't get on. What happened? But if you register early, you'll be able to just come right on with no problem. And again, we'll be doing some regional training, face-to-face trainings in some of the regions this year. And we will continue to help you develop your campaigns as we go. Great. Mm-hmm. Great. Someone's line is open. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Wahida. This was excellent. I just want to add that, and Nana has been commenting on in the chat box that we're also going to be featuring the communications. Jenny will be leading a communication series, a webinar, and I'll be leading a policy skills building webinar that will all be integrated into this broader series too. So everyone should stay tuned for that. And those will be coming throughout the year.
Teresa Sullivan wants to know how soon will this webinar be on the website? Because they're going to show it at Authority Leadership Training. You will get the link today. Teresa. You will also get a Word document today with the homework, with that chart, right? Because that way it can be interactive. You're done. You can write when you all get your answers, and then send it back to me. I hope I said that part. I don't know if I made it clear. When you all do, I'm hoping to receive your homework back from the regions, and even if you're not in the chapter, if you want to do this, everybody who's on this webinar, everybody who was invited to this webinar will get a copy of this homework. I'm happy for you all to send it back in. So do the survey, do the homework, continue coming on roll calls, continue coming on SCAT calls, continue coming on policy calls, because all of this together, this is the roadmap. All these pieces only work when we work together. We're going to be encouraging our policy reps to start you off in the regions with these campaigns and lead these campaigns, but we're going to be encouraging our co-chairs to make sure these campaigns get on the agendas. The co-chairs are making the agendas. The policy reps are going to need time to help you all develop your campaigns. Your SCAT reps are going to need time to help you with your messaging on your campaigns. Everybody's saying the same thing at the same time, no matter where you are, So everybody has a role to play in developing your campaigns. Yes. We will try to announce the webinar, all of the dates. We do have all the dates already laid out, so we'll be more than happy to send you all of the dates so you can all put them in your calendars early. So that's something else that can also happen today. PDFs, you get a link, you get a homework, and you'll get the date for the next webinars. So we don't want to continue to hold people if people think that they've oversaturated. I understand that. Okay, Teresa asked another question. Teresa says, she's asking me, and I'm sorry to answer you in public, but I think it's a good question. Teresa says, so the role of senior members of the chapter is to support the co-chairs, right? That is correct. Every chapter does not have a senior member. Some of the chapters have senior members. Senior members are members who are also board members. We want board members pretty much working on board work. We want them doing board of directors, work groups. They have their own work groups to work on. But if you are a board member and there's a chapter in your region where you live, of course you're going to be an advisor to that chapter. And so we call you the senior member of the chapter. And your job is to support the co-chair, not to do the co-chair's work, right? Because you're building the next tier of leaders. Our co-chairs are our next tier of leaders. And we need to ensure the sustainability of PWN by preparing a next tier of leaders. And we can't prepare them if we do the work for them. But we can help prepare them by advising them and guiding them. So it's very important if you are a person who has more experience, use that experience in your chapter, and you need to build the next tier of leaders. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar so folks can do the survey. It'll take you right to the survey, and you all have our contact information. I'm sure you all know how to contact us. So, Arnita, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar so folks can go to the survey.
Thank you. I think that's great. Thank you, Wahida.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Nana, thank you for your help in the chat box. We couldn't do it without you. And everybody have a wonderful, blessed day.
All right.